Hello and welcome. Hello and welcome to this edition of Rights and Recourse, a show that brings you information and analysis of legal matters and issues affecting your rights. My name is Dumila Matez. Remember, you can also be part of our discussion today by tweeting us at Rights Recourse or calling our studio line on 011 714 5497 or 5498. You can also tweet us at Rights and Recourse or email your thoughts to rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. Despite the recent improvement within the Department of Home Affairs, the department's record with respect to refugees and immigrants remains disturbingly ineffectual. Among the most troubled of the services for migrants is its asylum system. This system has consistently failed to carry out its legal mandate and regularly acting outside the law. If a report released this week by the African Center for Migration and Society detailing rampant corruption is anything to go by, urgent steps will have to be taken to stem the rot. In today's program, Rights and Recourse will be trying to get to the bottom of the scourge of corruption and identify solutions to the problem. To discuss this and many other concerns are Mr. Mkhuseli Apleni, Director General of the Department of Home Affairs, Mr. Wayne Ncube, Head of the Detention Monitoring Unit from Lawyers for Human Rights, and in our Cape Town studio, Dr. Ronnie Amit, Senior Researcher from the African Center for Migration and Society at Charles Wits University. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse. Let me start with you, Ronnie. Can you please help us? What motivated the African Center for Migration and Lawyers for Human Rights to undertake this research?
Well, for several years now, we've been hearing anecdotal reports of corruption at the country's refugee reception offices. So what we wanted to do was present a more systemic picture of how widespread the problem is and how pervasive it was, so that we could move beyond these more anecdotal reports to more empirical evidence.
Could you give us a glimpse as to what you found and explain the methodology that you used?
Well, we surveyed close to 1,000 respondents outside of the country's 5 refugee reception offices. And we found that almost a third of the people we interviewed experienced corruption at some point, and many of those on an average of 4.4 times. And that corruption was the highest at the Marabastad office in Pretoria, where 62% of respondents reported experiencing corruption. We noted this pretty much at every stage of the process, from waiting in the queues to getting into the office, getting documents, renewing documents. Really, every stage of the asylum application process was subject to some form of corruption.
This is not your first report. I see you have issued many other reports. There's one called No Way In. Are there similar reports? Is that the same as the one that you have? That you released recently?
Well, that report was really looking at people's experiences at the refugee reception offices, what was happening when they arrived, the levels of services they were getting, were they able to get documents, did they understand their rights, did they understand the asylum process. And in that research, we did have a question on corruption. So that gave us an indication that this was a problem that we wanted to look at more in depth. So that led us to do a report focused exclusively on corruption.
The department has remained in the throes of illegal and thousands of undocumented refugees coming into South Africa. It did not anticipate these acts of corruption, or what's the problem?
No, firstly, let me welcome any report which is written by anyone around issues at Home Affairs, because those reports, they empower us to resolve the problems. Because we understand that there are challenges in the department. You'll recall when we had the Minister Zuma then, she did indicate that, yes, with regard to civic services, we have turned the corner. Now our focus is going to be on immigration. Hence now the minister is in the process of coming up with a new paradigm shift on immigration. But let's come now to the issues of asylum seekers. Asylum seekers is really a challenge. As you know, that is one of the vulnerable groups. So it's easy for people to extort some bribe in that process. So as a department, we understand that our solution in the matter is to automate. If you are in a paper process, you must forget, because it is a fatal ground for corruption. So because of those, there are a lot of changes which we are doing in the department, even dealing with the matters of legislation. Even now, we're in cabinet last week submitting amendments to the current Refugee Act, whilst we are working, because on the new immigration paradigm shift, there is going to be a chapter on efficient refugee or asylum seeker management. But what we'll be doing now with the amendments, the key thing is to say, we want to fast track the processes, because if there are backlogs, then that is a fertile ground to make to people and say, look, we are on the queue, let me get this. So in that process, we will still remain with a refugee reception determination officer. However, any decision is going to go now to SCRA to review whether that decision which has been taken, whether you say approved or not approved, must be looked at. Then the other major intervention which will be coming up with it before the end of the year will be implementing an appointment system in Marabastad in particular, to start there. Because once you've got an appointment system, then it helps you, because there are no, jumping the queue and all that. But lastly, as you are aware, that the minister last Friday, besides the issue of the report, has launched a Visa Masina, which we picked up from the vendor, which means now root out corruption, where we are saying to our officials, you get caught, we're going to be dealing with you with the might of the law. So already we have given in our report to say, just in 1 year, we were able to arrest about 30 people within the Marabastad. So it's something which we are aware of. It is a challenge which we are aware of it, but the issue is to say, what are we doing with it? We are dealing with that. So again, when we get reports like this, we don't run away, we don't fight about them. As long as they point the issues, then for us is to resolve that, because we are saying no one should be subjected on any issues of corruption.
Mr. Ncube, I want to go back to Ronnie, but I want to start with you. Yes. You were part of this research that the Center for Migration was working on. What did you pick up? I think there are legal issues about the rights of the refugees that you might have picked up.
Yes, well, obviously, as Ronnie pointed out before, we were constantly hearing about corruption in our different law clinics that we operate throughout the country, as we assist a lot of asylum seekers and refugees. And we approached the department on regular intervals to say, yes, we think this is a problem which is growing, but we obviously needed that empirical evidence that we can go back and show them. And 2 years ago, we did approach the Deputy Minister at the time and told them that we are going to carry out the survey. So, and this is really to empower the department as a DGSA, so that they are aware where the gaps are and how to deal with it. We also informed the Deputy Minister that we would give them the report before we released it, which we did 3 weeks ago before we actually released it, so that they have a first look at it and they can respond. And we also offered a meeting with them to actually discuss the report and how to take it further. Unfortunately, we have not yet had that meeting with the department, but we are hopeful that we'll be able to discuss it with them and other stakeholders. Obviously, what we have seen in the report is that there are there's corruption which is systemic throughout the whole system, and it is obviously more prevalent in your Gauteng reception officers. And it is important to understand they're the reception officers that get the most asylum seekers and refugees, particularly with some of the closures of the other reception officers and the suspension of some of the services. And I think...
that by suspension of the services, you mean the closing of some of the reception offices?
Yes. So there have been 3 reception offices which have been closed either completely or partially. One of them was the Johannesburg reception office.
We'll come to that.
Yes.
I have a question specifically on that. I just want to
Yes.
go back to Ronnie. Ronnie, one of the problems you mentioned, you say the corruption is very rife and there's so much of it at Marabastad. What are the issues and why Marabastad?
Well, I think one of the reasons is that Marabastad gets more applicants than the other offices. Unfortunately, we did not have access to the refugee reception offices themselves, so we couldn't actually look at the management processes to be able to do a comparison of why, for example, the Durban office showed much lower levels of corruption than the Marabastad office. But this has been a long-standing problem at Marabastad. And certainly the high demand, the more people there are trying to get access to services and unable to access those services, the more opportunities there are for corruption.
Did you recently, talking about Marabastad and some of the refugee reception offices, recently you had to defend a case in court about closing down the offices in PE and other parts of South Africa. What's happened to that case?
Well, that case is still proceeding. But as I've said to you, that there are amendments which we have put through, which will be now, if the cabinet approves, that they will be for public comments. But one of the things which I've identified, why is a problem in Marabastad? You know what is the biggest problem? Is that people will cross from a Bait Bridge, but leave a refugee reception center which is at Musina and come to clog the system at Marabastad. One of the proposals which we are putting, which we might not agree with the colleagues, is to say now, no, we need to have a way of saying you can be serviced in this particular refugee reception center, because now Durban and Musina, which are being efficient because we are managing a number which you can be able to regulate. But once we let Marabastad to be overcrowded, because you ask yourself a question, you are a refugee, I assume that you don't have all the resources. How do you travel all the way from Musina, come to Marabastad? And hence, also one of our policies to say, close the refugee centers which are within the country. They must be next to the border where people are coming in. Now, a minister will be announcing now, as we took that decision, that in Libombo, will be coming now with another refugee reception
Libombo is
center.
the one in Swaziland.
No, it's next to Mozambique.
That's next to Mozambique.
Yes, because we are saying, if you are an asylum seeker, within 5 days, you must go and present yourself in the asylum refugee reception center. So now we're making this thing to facilitate for people. Then, why we still keep the one in Marabastad? We have got the biggest airport here, which is OR Tambo. So if there are refugees coming from there, yes, they must go and be serviced within the Marabastad. But the numbers will be manageable. But a person who uses the route up to Mozambique must go to a refugee reception center in Libombo. The one who has used the route of Zimbabwe must go to Messina. Those who have used the route to Swaziland and come there, you go to Durban. Then we'll be able to resolve this issue. But if you're going to let people go where they please to go and create that problem, so we have to control it. That's what we are proposing, so that now the Marabastad must be resolved.
Well, that's a DG for us. We're talking about this issue of a report that was released by the Center for Migration, the African Center for Migration, and the Lawyers for Human Rights to see what can we do to deal with this issue of refugees who are coming into South Africa. If you'd like to join us in today's discussion, please call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Recourse or email us at rightsandrecourse.co.za. Stay with us.
city of Durban and its surroundings is one that is filled with history and cultural diversity.
Durban is a natural paradise known for its gorgeous coastline of sun-kissed beaches and subtropical climate.
Flea markets are essential to visit if you want to experience Durban's Afro-Oriental atmosphere.
The city of Durban is an elegant, mature and ambitious city. The vendors at the Vic offer a range of African and Oriental products, an eclectic mix that is hard to resist.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays at 5:30 p.m. CAT.
Welcome back to Rights and Recourse as we discuss this issue of refugees. Ronnie, I'm coming back to you in Cape Town. What form does this corruption take? Is it money exchanges hands, or what is happening?
Well, it takes a variety of forms, but yes, generally it is the exchange of money, and the amounts vary greatly from a few rand to thousands of rands, depending on the level of service that's being requested.
Do refugees have to pay for being registered?
No, you don't even pay a cent, and that's what we always inform people about, to say services at a refugee reception center are at no cost. But what makes people to do this? You know, once you put yourself as well, that's why we must also remember there is a corrupter and a corrupted. We can't ignore that. Once you put yourself in a vulnerable position, you are also creating that. That's why I was saying in South Africa, we are welcoming anyone who comes to our country. But there's something we still don't understand. Why people, they don't cross through a port of entry and be given a document. Because as you are in a port of entry, you are given a document which allows you to sojourn into the country up to get into the refugee reception center. But people come into the country illegally. Once you do that, it is easy now when you deal with that refugee reception determination officer to say, hey, I know you are already on an illegal part. Therefore, if you do something, so you make yourself vulnerable. However, we are saying we want to put all these processes to say our officials have got no right to be able to do that. So they must be able to say, I cannot participate. That's why we arrest them. We're not theorizing here. We're not saying we are going to arrest them. We have arrested them, and we are clear. Minister made it clear to say we are prepared to be an empty department rather than to sit with staff members who are rotten.
Mr. Mube, you wanted to come in there.
Yes, well, I think those are very encouraging words in terms of what we're hearing from the DG and the Minister in the recent reports in the last few days in terms of the steps that they've taken to deal with corruption, and we hope that it'll be supplemented by some of the recommendations that we have detailed in this report. But there are a couple of things I just want to touch on that he's talking about in terms of the irregular travel of refugees. And this is something that research has already shown internationally. You can read some reports from James Harwood, I think I might get the name wrong, about the travel of refugees. It is generally irregular given the nature of their flight. And most people are not able to flee a war-torn country with their documents or to procure access into the country in your normal fields. And this is something that is even recognized by refugee law, because it says that even if you have entered irregularly, as soon as you then approach an authority or a reception office, at that point you can then be given a document, what we call the immigration document, which allows you to approach a refugee reception office. And so it is something that has to be taken into account when you are formulating your policy.
I think what the DG is saying, yes. I don't want to speak for him because he's here. I think what the DG is saying there are ports of entry. There's a port of entry at Beitbridge, there's a port of entry at Libombo, there's a port of entry in Musina. Therefore, you must come through those refugee reception offices and not come into South Africa and travel illegally into and come to the center and then ask for asylum.
Yes, and so what I'm saying is, whilst someone who has information and who has the right documentation to begin with, that is what would be expected. But most refugees, and a lot of them do not come from English-speaking countries, they arrive into the country in an irregular way, not because of choice. And it's only once in the country that they then obtain information in terms of where to then proceed. And you also have to remember that we're talking about indigent people normally arrive with nothing. And the only way that they initially sustain themselves on arrival is seeking out similar communities. And those communities are not all going to be based in Messina, in Beitbridge,
yes,
in Liboye, or wherever it is. And now you have someone who, the very first opportunity he has to speak to someone who can explain things to him, he has already made his way, having known that there is a community in Mayfair, a community in Mitchell's Plain, a community in East London. And he then, that is a community that is sustaining him. He then has to travel back to Messina or to Port Elizabeth, or to Marabastad. You see, these are the tensions. We also have to understand what the patterns around asylum travel is and all those different tensions to get a working system.
DG, there's something Mr. Ngcuba mentioned here that has to do with languages. Some of these refugees who come into the country, or migrants who come into the country, can't speak English. They speak various languages that are not necessarily spoken in South Africa. Do you have services at these reception centers where people can be translated to or interpreted to about how the law works, how these things should work?
Yes. Well, Mr. Ngcuba, firstly, he knows clearly that in the conventions which we have signed, it says if you are a refugee, you first seek protection on your first safe country. So it means now if you are coming from Somalia, how do you come from Somalia and be in the border at Beitbridge without you first seeking your protection on the first country? The people who can cross without going to a border post are those ones who are sharing a border with. I don't expect a Zimbabwean to go through a border post of Zimbabwe but is running from Zimbabwe. But I don't expect the same thing from a Somalian or somebody from Egypt or somebody from China. That's what we're talking about, and say that is a convention which the world who have signed and agreed to it. It's what people are not we're not requesting something which is only for us.
What you're saying, DG, I think I want to support you there,
yes,
although I don't have to, but this is the same thing that they are fighting about in Europe.
Yes.
Italy is complaining to the rest of Europe saying, help us, we have this problem with these refugees who are coming in droves, there are thousands. And France is saying, no, the first country of arrival must help the refugees.
That's a convention which we have signed as countries of the world. Then coming to the issue now of us, interpretation. Also, it's us as this country. Other countries have taken a route of encampment policy to say, you come to a country, we put you into a camp. We said we want to support integration because our policies are more on a human rights basis. But what we are saying, it does not mean people must go everywhere they like. We need to control, because if we don't control, then we're creating a problem for ourselves. So that's why we're saying we need to control people and then be able, so that we can be able to protect them. Because when you come to this country, you are seeking protection. We don't want you to be vulnerable. If we're going to let people go wherever, is what is creating problems. Let's come to the question of interpretations. We have them in all the ports of entry. We are paying huge sums of money for interpretation services so that people are able. Then is another route where the corruption is coming through. As you were saying, it manifests itself into many things. We've got runners. That's why if you look at what was around Marabastad, people go and queue in the early hours of the morning. Who is there? It's not officials of Home Affairs. Are the runners who goes there and said, I will facilitate, I will do this. Then by in the morning they come there. So now the interpreters themselves are also contributing into the manner. That's why now we want a process where there must be no interface between the interpreter and an asylum seeker, as we go to the conferences, you only put your thing in, you don't know the person who's interpreting for you. We want to build those systems so that there is a less of interface, so that nobody says, I'm an interpreter, this is what has been said. They said pay 5,000, whereas maybe there was no such a, but it's that our people do not understand, and it will take us time. That's why we want our universities to continue teaching these languages, French, Swahili, and so that I can have a Home Affairs official who can speak the language, not to rely on interpretation.
Let me go back to Ronnie. Ronnie, I don't know whether you want to respond to some of the things the DG has said, but also at the same time, I just want to say something that the DG said, that there's a corruptor and a corruptee. I read somewhere in one of the reports that one of the asylum seekers was saying, the police asked me for money. Now, I don't want to go and report the policeman because I gave him the money willingly.
Yes, that's true. If I can first respond to a few of the DG's points. As far as the first safe country, there's nothing in the International Refugee Convention that requires a refugee to seek refuge in the first safe country. That principle simply isn't found in the International Convention or in the domestic law. That's a principle that has emerged bilaterally by agreement with states, but it's not an obligation on refugees. And as far as the integration question, South Africa is certainly to be encouraged for not having an encampment policy. But what happens is people are in the system, in the asylum system, for a very long time. We found people were in the system for an average of 2.8 years. Now, these people have to be self-sufficient during that period, and that's why they come to places like Cape Town, Johannesburg, Pretoria, because they can't support themselves if they're at the border area in Musina for 2.8 years. That's why they apply at Marabastad. If they apply in Musina, they have to go back there every 2 to 3 months, and that's a significant burden. So that's why you see the high demand on Marabastad. And keeping all of those people in the border area is going to be highly problematic if they're not provided with any support. As far as your question on the corruptor and the corruptee, that's true. And many of the people that we interviewed, they didn't want to participate in the corruption, but they felt that they simply had no choice, because when they tried to do things legitimately, they didn't get anywhere. And their choice was either pay or remain undocumented and be at risk of being arrested and deported, and in many cases deported back to the grave dangers from which they had fled.
The other thing, DG, I'm coming to you, Mr. Ngcuba. I just wanted to respond to something else which I want to ask you with regard to recourse for the asylum seekers. The question I want to ask you, do you employ these runners and the marshals who look after the queues, or are those just people who are coming around? Why don't you have those people chased away? Another one is, of course, I'm told even the security that are employed by Home Affairs are involved in this corruption.
Yeah, well, as we said, that corruption is a cancer. And we're talking about, to say again, corruption is not on one area. It's a cancer throughout, whether you want to get a driver's license, whether you want to buy a house, all that. That's why, as a government, we're saying we've got a zero tolerance to corruption. But what needs to happen is to people see visible. In fact, we're even saying, if there's something like that, we want to make sure that our employees have got a fear of God, so that when he's sitting there, he must know, I don't know who is this person who's looking after me, so that they must not get into government. Pays very well, I think so. So for people to get into this thing. So it's something which we really want to work it and make sure that people. Let's come to this question of runners.
Can we come back, when we come back from a break? We'll start with the runners, and then I want to come to Mr. Ngcuba. The DG has reminded me of something we used to be told when we were at primary school. So whatever you do, you must know that God is watching you. Please don't go away. We'll be back after the break. Stay with us.
From humble beginnings This selfless icon altered the history of the world, freed a country, and united a nation. He taught us humility and forgiveness. To the world, he is Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. But to us, he is simply Tata Madiba.
Welcome back to Rights and Recourse. Let us now hear from the Twitter community what they have to say. And must remember, God is watching from a distance. Well, Dr. Cooch says lack of proper supervision of home affairs, human labor. A true refugee comes here and with nothing. How can such a person pay? Makes no sense. Who is charging them? Remington says time constraints on the part of the refugees will lead him to yield these greedy people. And Remington once again says employers require you to come back with the paper this day or you lose your position or you lose your job. Let's go back to the first one, DG, the one that says it's lack of proper supervision from Home Affairs.
Well, what we believe should be a supervision.
Probably you can add what you wanted to say earlier. My apologies for interrupting.
You see, when confronted by the issue of corruption there, then as a law enforcement agencies in the country, we said, let's go and work together. That's why there you see a police van there, but the police themselves has accepted that some of the police officials, they also get involved into the corruption. The runners are not Home Affairs. As there was a mention to say, when you come there, you can't speak the language. There are people who are already in South Africa who can speak the language. And then they go there, they become runners themselves. Foreign nationals, not South Africans, who are also there and become the runners and say, I will facilitate your process. Hence, now the answer is on question number one, to say we automate that process. I'm able to get a form online. I'm able to make my application online for an appointment, and I go there. Then you will resolve these issues. Otherwise, if we are still on a paper environment, we'll never close that. That's what we are working on and say we are starting now to make sure that we've got an online a system to make an appointment, and in that system, it's gonna have all the languages. At the same time, I'll put my fingerprint when I'm making the appointment. Then the gate at Marabastad is gonna be opened with your fingerprint. So you don't need to be number 1 or number 10 or somebody to facilitate you to do that. And then once you get inside, you are able to get your forms electronically. Then that is going to help us. And as we are saying now that you'll recall the corruption which we had on the civics services when people were getting IDs and all those things. But those things are of the past because we implemented...
And South African women being married to Pakistani.
Because we implemented a system where it makes sure that it was you who was operating on this application, nobody else. That's why
let's take this call, DG. My apologies once again. Let's take this call from Abji from Johannesburg. Abji, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse. Hello. Good afternoon.
To you, Rights and Recourse.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes. What's your question?
Yeah, my question is: it is true about the corruption which is going on in Home Affairs. It happens all refugee reception offices in all across the country, and it is always there. And sometimes even myself, I applied a refugee ID, and my name was on the wall. It was being put on the wall, and when I go to Home Affairs to go and collect it, I have been told your ID is not yet ready, while my name it is there. Several times. And then after that, up to now, I just decided to live like that, and it is still there in the Home Affairs. And
thank you very much. Thank you. We got the gist of your story, Abdi. Thank you very much, Mr. Dlube. According to the report here from corruption, it's Q here for corruption. That's what they've got. These nice fancy subtitles these reports. So one says no way in, and the other one says Hugh here for corruption. The pervasiveness of corruption in all aspects of the asylum process reveals a practice that is no longer bounded by legal guarantees. That's one of the lies that says there. This means asylum seekers have no recourse. Is that true? What's a recourse for the asylum seekers?
Well, I mean, the Constitution obviously protects them. It outlines that they have a right to fair administrative action. And the problem with that is that to get recourse in terms of the law, you need to be able to access the courts, you need to be able to access the administrators. And a lot of that ends up requiring you to have some sort of legal representation. And unfortunately for injured people, most of them just do not have that.
The lawyers of human rights are there.
Yes, so we run 5 law clinics around the country, and we probably do not get to the majority of the clients of the asylum seekers who are out there. And there are not enough service providers who provide pro bono legal assistance, which is why instead of just dealing with 1 or 2, the specific individuals that come with you, we need to deal with the systemic issues. And we do that by releasing these reports, providing the evidence to the Director General, to the department, so that we can start going into engagements about how to fix the system.
Let's hold it for a moment. Let's take this call from Venolia from Cape Town. Venolia, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Thank you so much for having me on the line. I would like to ask the Director General a few questions, and I hope that maybe he'll be able to assist me. I'm a citizen, but then I've got a foreign spouse. I know this is a bit different, but then I've been trying all angles and I've never gotten help, but today I'm happy because I can speak to him. I've got a spouse who's been an asylum seeker since 2001. As I'm speaking currently, I'm with him on a daily basis. We've been together and we've got 3 children. But then we also try to do things the legitimate way via VFS Global, but his application was rejected. We appealed. But then what I'm saying is that the corruption happens because when we try to do things in the legal way, then we don't get assistance. That is why people now resort to that. So in respect of this, I would like the Director General maybe to give me an idea, what can I do from here? Because I've got 3 children who need to eat. They're still young. They need their father on a daily basis. And he's going to renew now in October, but then Home Affairs is taking their papers. So I don't know what's going to happen to him. So I need clarity on that because I pay tax. I do everything. I'm a law-abiding citizen. So it hurts me that I'm sitting in a dilemma like this, whereas I vote, but I don't get the services for my vote.
Thank you, Venolia. DG, you heard the frustration in her voice towards the end. She was close to tears. One of the problems, I seem to have read somewhere that the department had to defend a case where spouses who had married foreigners staying with them in South Africa were having difficulties for the foreigners to get papers for them to become South African citizens or to get working documents.
Well, that's why I was interested to, but I didn't just say my application is rejected, but I didn't know what is the reason. You say, what was the problem we have with the permits before? The issue was we're not responding. That's why we appointed this VFS Global, so that there is no issue to say I don't have an answer. But now, at least it's got an answer. But the only thing I didn't get is to say what is the reason for the rejection. As you know, that also this poses a lot of risk to us. These issues of marriages for convenience, and then people get married, and then after changing the names and all that. But they said, Peter didn't tell me what is the reason, because now we're able to look at your permit, we're able to approve it, and we're able to decline, and then you appeal, and we're able to respond to it. So I don't know about what could be the reason for that. But as you know, that my number is not a hidden number. I will leave it here.
I picked it up on the website.
It's there, 0824497535. You can SMS me the details so that we can look at it and understand what is the issue.
I hope Venolia will pick up the Home Affairs number, the DG's number. Venolia is on the website of Home Affairs. You can pick it up there. It's a cell phone number. You can call him directly. He just wants to know how he can help you. Now, there's another number on the screen to report corruption. That one is for reporting corruption from the Department of Home Affairs that you can phone 0800 701 701. Mr. Nglubo, you wanted to come in there.
Yes. Just to extend from what the caller was talking about, this frustration in having tried to go through the process, and I suppose from her point we would still have to deal with the individual case, feeling like there is no actual integrity in the process because you do not know what has happened. This is more prevalent, and it is something that is also discussed in the report, in the asylum side, particularly when it comes to status determination, in that if you look at the quality of the refugee status determination decisions, and there's another report that Ronnie has actually made dealing with this specifically, there's not a lot of trust in that system and in the report, in that you'll go there, you will provide your story, and your application will not be processed in terms of whether or not you comply with the law, but now you're worried that it depends on other circumstances, like whether or not you've paid, or you will be stuck in the system for years without actually getting a decision, which is why it is important to improve the quality of decisions in the asylum process. I cannot speak for the...
Fidolia, she's back on the line, she can hear you.
I cannot speak for her claim. Like the DG says, it depends on the reasons. But you start to improve the quality of the decisions, and you have some sort of oversight in terms of how those decisions are being made, then it closes some of those doors for corruption. It provides greater trust in the system. People know, look, I comply. Yeah, I know if I go follow step ABC, I'll get my permit. If I don't, I will not. And then there'll be no reason for people to start thinking about leaving that system, or, what we call the lack of transparency and integrity is what encourages this corruption. And it is something that also has to be dealt with.
Well, let me go back to Vinolia and Cape Town, although we do not want this to make a discussion between Vinolia and the DG. Vinolia, you have another problem, or did you get what we were telling you earlier?
Yes, the thing is I wanted to tell him the reason because I've got the rejection letter right in front of me.
What does the rejection letter say? It
says no documentation.
Okay, Vinolia, you can phone the DG. We'll get you the DG's number before we finalize the program. That's his cell phone number. He wants you to talk to him directly. Let me go back to Cape Town, to Ronnie. Ronnie, earlier you spoke about a convention where you had a disagreement with the DG. I would want to believe that convention is the United Nations Convention.
Yes, that's correct. It's the International Refugee Convention, and also South Africa's Refugee Act says nothing about the first safe country.
What is it that, for me, really, I said to somebody, this whole thing of refugees having to pay at these reception centers is actually not only corruption, but extortion.
That's true. These people are in very desperate circumstances, and they really feel like they have no choice. Often they don't have the money, and those people are then forced to go really underground, which doesn't serve the interests of the country's migration management, or people are forced to pay. And what we're left with is a situation where there's really no credibility in the asylum system because, as Wayne mentioned, the problems in the quality of the status determination decisions, and because of corruption, the people who are getting refugee status and the people who are being rejected in no way reflects the actual basis of their asylum claim. So we don't really know who's in need of protection and who's getting that protection, and often the people who are most in need of it are not the people who are getting it.
Well, we'll continue our discussion on this issue when we come back from the break. If you'd like to join us, you can still call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498. And when we come back, I want to ask the DG about something very loaded where people are saying refugees from Europe are treated differently from refugees from Africa. Don't go away. Stay with us. Well, yes, welcome back to Rights and Recourse. The conventions around the refugees we spoke about are the South African Act number 130 of 1998, as well as the United Nations Refugee Convention and the 1967 Protocol and the 1969 Organization of African Unity Refugee Convention. Those are the conventions we are talking about. First, let me come to this question, DG. There is also this belief that refugees from European countries and China are treated differently, as some of them can approach courts of laws. I think Mr. Mncube made reference to that, as we witnessed in the Kreitzer case.
Well, you'll recall what is in the public discourse, which today maybe would have discussed the issue of the visa regulations. One of the things which we have put there is to say people must go and apply in person before they come to South Africa. And everybody is up in arms with that. And one of the examples which we are using is exactly of Mr. Kreitzer, who is now in jail. Mr. Kreitzer came to South Africa as a tourist and using a particular passport, and when it is in our country, it changes to somebody else. And another issue on what we are talking about was the issue of a transit visa, which we had between now people who are coming to our neighboring countries and just cross. Because what we found out is that people will cross and go to the neighboring countries, and thereafter they lose their passport. Then you ask yourself, okay, we've got a disagreement with the first country, first safe country rule, which is there. But I think the only disagreement is on whether it's in this book or not that book. But as a principle, it is there. It is there. So what I'm saying is that if you've got situations like that, that's why we ask ourselves, how can a Chinese be in the border of a Beit Bridge and say, I don't have a passport, I'm an asylum seeker? How did that person walk from China to here? So those are the things which we are talking about, to say, if we don't tighten this, then it makes a problem that the genuine asylum seekers are not getting a proper service. It is also a fact, my colleagues knows here, that out of the 100% of people applying for asylum in South Africa, only 10% who qualifies to meet the definition of who is an asylum seeker. They know that.
We'll come to that. I wanted to ask you that question, or whether are we still looking at refugees as economic refugees. Let's take this call from BD from Durban. BD, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Afternoon, and how are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
Applying, talking about a particular case for repatriation guarantee refund.
Yes, go ahead.
I applied in December last year at the same time with my colleague that I'm working with. He got his refund in 6 weeks. I didn't get mine. I went to the office, Durban office. They said, no, wait for 6 months.
Okay, this is not necessarily what you talk about, but DG, if you have an answer, he's talking about the repatriation guarantee, which is the money that you paid for. I don't know what you're repatriating.
I don't know. I mean, something...
It's probably a SARS issue.
Yeah, because if he says now the other one gets it within 6 weeks and him not, maybe something which can just follow it up.
Okay, I think it's probably a South African Revenue Service issue.
No, it's from us.
It's from you.
Yes.
Or the DG says from you. Probably we will show you the number that you can phone the DG. Probably I should ask you to give that number to our floor manager so she can take it to the front, so they put that number on the screen, so that this gentleman can phone you. The question I want to come back to something else, DG. That I wonder, you wanted to say something.
Okay, well, I just want to make a quick comment on the number which is being given for what we consider are the genuine refugees. We're saying that 10%.
Oh, yes, genuine refugees, yes. Or economic refugees.
Yes, or economic refugees. I mean, there are 2 points there. And because of the prevalent corruption and the fact that the system now lacks integrity, and we don't know, we have some genuine refugees who are not getting protection because they're not getting those services, and some people who are buying their status. We cannot use those figures accurately if it is 10% currently, right? So we can only have a real understanding of which people need protection when we have got to a point where we've rooted out that corruption and we're able to make better quality decisions. Because if you go and you look at an actual refugee status determination decision being issued by the reception officers right now, a lot of them are beyond terrible, and they do not provide any a lot of them do not even get the actual person's claim down right.
I just want to go back to something. I'm sorry to be interrupting you. I heard what you were saying, but I want to go back to solutions.
Yes.
Ronnie, I know in the report you give solutions on what needs to happen to solve the situation. Can you give us some of those solutions?
Well, basically, the focus needs to be on, it's really on three things. One is on improving awareness of individuals, their rights in the asylum system, and how the process should work. The second is improving management of the refugee reception offices. And that includes things as like what the DG said about mechanizing it and having a record of who is coming for what reason. And really eliminating, right now, the people working at the refugee reception offices have a wide amount of discretion in determining who they're going to give documents to, and there's really no accountability around that process. So eliminating that discretion and making it more mechanized. And then the third issue is really around reforming immigration policy and migration management. And it's true that there are a large number of economic migrants who are entering the asylum system, though I would echo Wayne's point that we really don't know that it's 90% because the status determination decisions that are being issued in no way reflect the nature of the claims and who we don't really know who's in the system. And people who flee torture are getting decisions saying they suffered no harm and it's safe for them to return to their countries. But the fact remains that economic migrants are entering the asylum system, and until there's an alternative mechanism for them to regularize their status in the country, they're going to continue to enter the asylum system. And even increasing border security is not going to solve the problem because people are going to continue to come in.
You mentioned the report that you also need the Chapter 9 institutions like your Human Rights Commission and a public protector to play a role in this. Have you had some working relationship with those organizations?
We haven't worked with them specifically around this report, although that's certainly our plan to begin to liaise with them. We have worked more generally with the Human Rights Commission around some of these issues relating to asylum and detention. So hopefully we can continue that relationship and focus exclusively on the issues of corruption and get into a dialogue with these institutions and with the Department of Home Affairs to start implementing some of these solutions.
DG, there was also a report that I picked up in my research that during the time of Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, there was this EQ system, and this system apparently was piloted in Khayelitsha. What happened to that system?
Well, that system, we're rolling it out in our offices. If we can go to our automated offices where we issue a smart card and a passport, we are having a queue management system which is working. So you get your card and then it tells you you're at this number and you get called. And also we have now rolled it out to about 140 offices. So it's the same system which I'm talking about that will be now deploying at Marabastad, but it will be more than the one in the offices, because they want to take, it will start from your appointment and then go and link with the queue management system when you come on your day. Because the appointment system is going to say you come at 3 minutes past 11. No, it won't be like that. It's going to say in this day we can take 50 or 100 people. Then on the day you come, then the queue management system now will say you are coming for extension, you are applying for the first time, and so that queue management system is going to help on that. But let me address a point which I don't agree with it, to say improving security in the borderline, it won't improve the situation. That can't be correct. Government is in the process now of coming up with a border management agency. Because we are saying it's not going to help us just to look at the things which are happening at a port of entry. That is a gate. But you don't look at the borderline. So that's why now you need fence. You can't say in your house you put a gate which is tight, but you let the fence to be everybody can come in. It can't be. So that's why you need to improve the situation and all that.
Let's pick up some closing comments from Mr. Ncube.
Yes, well, A lot of the things that the DG is saying are very encouraging, and we hope to be able to work with the department in some of the areas that they are taking to combat this corruption. We obviously want to ensure that they're able to engage with stakeholders in terms of how they proceed, not just in the area of dealing with corruption, but just the services that they provide with asylum seekers. And I'm hoping that we will get the meeting that we have requested soon. Yes.
Thank you very much to my guests here today, Mr. Wayne Ngube from Lawyers for Human Rights, the DG, Mr. Apleni, and down in Cape Town, Ronnie Amit. In closing, I found this paragraph in the report: in the light of its harmful effects, we must move beyond hollow statements and adopt proactive measures to combat corruption. 3 key issues are at stake. First, corruption affects an individual's ability to access protection. Second, it implicates the integrity of the system that is critical for South Africa to meet its constitutional and international obligations. Third, corruption in one department runs the risk of spreading like a cancer to other departments, and more generally distorting incentive structures of governance, lacking predictability, accountability, equality and fairness. A system where legal guarantees do not dictate governmental behavior. This has been Rights and Recourse. The program is rebroadcast at 10 tonight and at 5 on Monday morning. Thank you to our guests, and from myself, Dumila Matez, and the rest of the team, good afternoon.